One of my favorite things in the world to do is watch Friends. I know it's been off for years and years. It's not even around, but I still find myself binge watching old episodes. And I was thinking about this today and thinking, it's the predictability of the friends in the circle, right? You have Chandler with his quirkiness, Monica with her type A of just everything has to be so neat and tidy and organized. It's Phoebe's ability to make you laugh at her silly songs. Ross always comes in with those smart comments, and Joey and him and his food, like it is just so hilarious. And of course, Rachel, she just brings everybody together, and it's just such this beautiful, cohesive team of people. And it's why I wanted to come on and share with you today that I have an opportunity for you to find your friends in the content creation space. So if you are thinking about creating your first or your next digital course, I don't want you to miss this opportunity because Amy Porterfield just opened the doors for registration for her Course Confident Bootcamp. And I'm actually offering a special bonus for anyone that registers for the Course Confident Bootcamp through my special link. So I want you to go to krystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register. That's krystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And what you're going to find when you get there is I have this special bonus private podcast series. It's called Money Mindset for Creators. So I want you to go register for Amy's bootcamp, download the podcast, and immediately start listening to it, because what this training is set up to do is to help you get your mind right about monetizing your content, making money so that you can fuel your content creation dreams. So go to krystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register for Course Confident. And I cannot wait for you to find your friends and find the people that will be there for you. Do you see what I did there? Yeah, nice little friends segue connection. Go to krystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And I cannot wait to see you inside. Okay, let's get into today's episode. If you were starting your podcast all over again today, would you do anything differently? This is the question that inspired today's episode. I was actually thinking about, we haven't talked about this in a while, and I was trying to plan content thinking, should we talk about starting or launching or marketing your podcast? Which, if you've been around here for a while, that's what we always talk about. But I thought to myself, if I were starting my podcast for the very first time in 2021, knowing all the things that I know today, what would I do differently? So that's what we are covering. So let's get right to it. Welcome to the Profit Podcast, where we teach entrepreneurs how to start, launch, and market their podcast. I'm your host, Krystal Profit, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thanks for hanging out with me today, because if you've been trying to figure out the world of podcasting, think of this show as the time-saving shortcut you've been looking for. So let's get right to it, shall we? So if you've been around here for a while, you know that I am a huge fan of the show Friends. And they recently came out with their reunion episode. It was such a big deal. And I started thinking about the episode of Friends. It was like the one that could have been, right? It's like the backstory of like, oh, well, what if Rachel went on to marry Barry? And what if Ross was still married to Carol? And what if Monica was still fat and Joey was still on Days of Our Lives and Chandler was a struggling artist trying to write comics and Phoebe worked at Merrill Lynch? And what's really funny is I just said all that off the top of my head. I was just thinking, I didn't have to look up any notes. I didn't have to look up that episode. I have literally seen this episode 100 times. And I was really like, that was just verbatim from memory. This is how dedicated to Friends that I am. But do you know what I'm talking about? There's like this episode of like the one that could have been. And that's kind of what I think about today's episode, like in looking back, we're going to look back over a little bit, like just a quick snapshot of what my journey has been like through podcasting, and if I would change anything and how things would look different if I were just starting. If I was a brand new baby podcaster in 2021, what would things look like? So first and foremost, if you're brand new around here, you haven't heard this story before, I started my podcasting journey in 2018 whenever I launched the Rookie Life podcast. I thought of the idea earlier that year, and then I launched in July 2018. And so y'all, it was a mess. Like I look back and I'm really surprised that I kept going. Even though the motto has always been from the very beginning, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. But I'm going to be real honest with you. I'm really surprised that you are listening to this podcast today, because back then, y'all, I didn't have a ton of listeners. Like I may have had what I think it took me 4 or 5 months to get my first 1,000 downloads. And I think that it took me, I don't even want to pull up my stats because it's just going to be sad. But it took me a really long time to even get to my first 100 downloads. Like that didn't happen on launch day. Let me just tell you that. Okay, that did not happen. I don't even know if that it happened after the first month. I don't know. And I don't even want to go look, right? Because stats aren't everything. Stats are not everything. But I will tell you, we had some humble beginnings around here. Okay? Like we just want to, that is a fact. Statement of fact. Very humble beginnings here at Profit Media when it comes to getting our podcast off the ground. But the reason I want to share this is because the journey from going from the Rookie Life to the Profit Podcast, like you are listening to episode 261 of this podcast. And between this podcast and my daily show, The Potty Report, y'all, that's 585 episodes. Yeah. Between all the bonus episodes and everything, like I added it up, right? Like as of me recording this podcast, I've recorded 585 podcast episodes. Y'all, that's insane. That's crazy. That's crazy town. Like in 3 years, not even like to be exact, because I'm recording this in June 2021. So it's just shy of 3 full years of doing the podcast. We've created 585 episodes. So that's kind of the journey that we've been on. But now I want to look at, if I were starting my podcast, like what are the main things that I've learned that I think would be super helpful for you today? And I could give you until the cows come home all the how-tos and the explanation of you need to do this, you need to do that. But that's what this whole podcast is anyway, right? It's mostly how-to, like how to launch your podcast, how to start your podcast, how to market your podcast, how to get better at email marketing, how to understand copywriting, how to do this, how to literally, this podcast is mostly a how-to, step-by-step, do this, then that. So that's not what today's episode is going to be. Today's episode is going to be me kind of pondering what would things look like if I had the information that I have today and I was starting a brand new show. Like let's just pretend, I've had this idea in the back of my mind that I wanted to start a podcast totally unrelated to podcasting and online marketing just to see what happens. I really have, just with the idea of anonymous, incognito. I wouldn't use my platform that I have. I wouldn't promote it on social media. I would just create this thing and see what happens. I've had this thought. I don't know if it's a good thought, but I've seen other people who are like YouTube experts. They'll do this. They do it all kind of incognito under the radar, like their face isn't in the video, their faces aren't on the thumbnails, but they can still get a lot of traction because they know how to use the optimization with SEO and keywords and all the things. So maybe this is just me thinking out loud. Maybe that's something that'll happen in the future, but it's in real time. I don't have plans to do that. But in looking back over my journey, I would have to say the number one thing that I'm so glad that I focused on in the very beginning is planning out content and scheduling episodes ahead of time. And then this means a few different things. So planning content just literally means getting an idea out of my head and planning it out, even if it's just a little bit, like a few bullet points on a Post-it note or whatever, like getting the idea a little bit fleshed out before I hit record, because then that minimizes the amount of editing I have to go back and do later, because I'm like, wait, what? Huh? What was I going to say? So planning out my content has been a lifesaver, an absolute lifesaver in helping me stay focused and really just maximize my time with recording. And then the other thing is scheduling. Now, I try to schedule when I'm going to record based on what's going on in my personal life. So for me, I have 3 kids. You've probably heard me say this before. And in real time, while I'm recording this, it's summertime. Y'all, I have 3 kids at home with me this summer. They have athletic camps. We have basketball camps. We have, there's all the things. There's a lot of things going on here at the house. And then if they're not outside, because we live in Texas, okay? I can't send them outside all day, every day in Texas. We don't have a pool at our house, and that doesn't sound safe, just to throw my 12, 9, and 5-year-old outside and say, go swim in the pool by yourself. That's not safe. But like I said, we don't have a pool at our house anyway. We have one in our neighborhood that we can go to, which I'm so grateful for. Okay, this is my secret sauce. This is my secret to success in the summertime. I will take a notebook with me to the pool, and while the kids are playing, because there's a lifeguard there, like thank goodness, shout out to all the lifeguards or previous, like if you are a lifeguard at any point in your lifetime, thank you very much for your service, because that helps this mama do a little work poolside, and I can take my notebook and plan out content when I'm there. But then I also have to schedule in, like, when am I going to have some quiet time in the house? When will I be able to batch record a few episodes? Or when can I create a YouTube video without screaming kids in the background? So planning and scheduling are 2 of the biggest things that I would still recommend for anybody starting today. And it would be something that I hold as a priority, as a top priority. Planning and scheduling out your time and just being very intentional with all the time that you do have. Because y'all, if you don't know this, I don't do this full time, like 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. working on my podcast stuff. I've kind of been part-time in doing this, and I have to work in time blocks of okay, I have 2 hours on this day to I have to get these 3 things done, or I have an hour and a half here and 30 minutes there. So I have to be very intentional with my time. And another side note, my youngest is actually starting kindergarten in the fall, and I have mixed feelings about it. It's our youngest child. And I'm just oh my gosh, I'm actually going to have from probably 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. and be able to work at my house undisturbed. And I'm I don't even, it's so foreign to me. I can't even think about what life is going to look like then, but I'm really excited. It's bittersweet for sure, because it means my baby boy's growing up. But okay, so those are the things that I would still concentrate on, still put a lot of emphasis on. I'm actually going to talk about priorities and goals almost last, but I wanted to dive into equipment, because this is the thing. Krystal, knowing what you know today about all the ins and outs of equipment, which by the way, I am not the equipment expert, but I have absolutely tested and tried and experimented with so many different types of equipment along my podcast journey. And the number one thing that I would recommend to anybody just getting started is to get a dynamic microphone. I heard this so much whenever I was getting started, and I had no idea what that meant. For the first 1.5 years of my podcast, I heard people saying, get a dynamic mic, don't get a condenser mic. And I heard it over and over again. And I'm like, what does that mean? And of course, instead of Googling it, I just was like, oh, I don't know what that means. I'm cute. I just can just keep pretending like I don't have to know what that means. Y'all Google it. If you really want to know the specifics about the dynamic versus condenser mic. But in a nutshell, a dynamic mic brings in your voice more than the sounds in your environment. Like it actually still echoes in my office. And I am well aware of this. And it's because my office has windows and shutters. It has glass doors. Like there's French doors in the office. And it's not fully carpeted in here. There's still a lot of echo. But there is way less echo in this office because I switched to a dynamic microphone. And just to give you an example of what is a condenser mic that's very popular, it's the Blue Yeti. And this has been promoted in pretty much the online space for a long time. It's like, oh, you got to get a Blue Yeti. Everyone needs a Blue Yeti. A Blue Yeti is perfect. It is a good option if you don't have to worry about echo in your space. If you're recording in your closet, if you're recording in a space that doesn't have any echo whatsoever, yeah, a Blue Yeti could probably work for you. But if you have tile floors and there's lots of windows and glass around, then it's not the best option. So let me give you some good options for a dynamic microphone. You have the ATR 2100X, I believe. I've never used this microphone, but I've always heard it's recommended. The Samsung Q2U or the Rode Pod mic. Those would be my recommendations. And there's actually a Buzzsprout video where they go through all the best mics for under $100. So I'm going to link to that in the show notes because I think it's going to be really, really helpful, especially for those of you still looking for options. Like, people always ask me about equipment options and I'm like, I can only tell you what I've used. And I love my Rode Procaster, but it wasn't cheap. It was not cheap. And I have gone through several iterations of upgrading my microphone. And this is what I've landed on 3 years into my journey. So this is not a beginner microphone. I started with a $20 microphone, okay? And actually the Fine, which is what I started with, my $20 microphone, they have come out with another newer iteration that I think is still really good. And I know it's under $100. I don't want to say it's under 50 because I'm not sure. And these are all in US dollars for my international peeps, because I know y'all are listening and you're like, wait, how much? What is it? Yeah. Anytime you hear me quoting, it's usually in US dollars. And then what equipment would I use? The other thing that I would suggest is your phone. And I know that sounds so simple, but I would still recommend this to someone who's just getting started and they're using their equipment as an excuse to not start recording. Use your phone. I have my iPhone and I have AirPods. If you don't have AirPods, you probably have the headphones that come with your device that have a built-in microphone. You can use that for podcasting. You could just talk straight into your phone as well. Like if the equipment is the thing that's holding you back, I want you to just get started with your phone. That's like my tough love talk about equipment. Like that should be the least amount of like stress and anxiety and your barrier to getting started. If that's what you're telling yourself is I don't have the right equipment, start with your phone. Period. The end. I've recorded so many episodes on my phone at this point. It's kind of ridiculous. But I mean, you can still do it. Absolutely. 100%. Okay. So that was what equipment would I use. Those would be my recommendations. So get a dynamic mic, not a condenser mic. Then softwares and tools that I would recommend, I'm going to tell you Buzzsprout. So this is my podcast hosting site. I'm going to have links to everything that I talk about here today. So the YouTube video from Buzzsprout, and I have lots of other softwares that I'm about to list out. I'm going to link to all of these in the show notes because I think that it's really helpful for people to see where you would necessarily use these tools, especially if you are a solo podcaster, you're a solopreneur, and you're like, I'd love to hire an editor one day, but I don't have the budget for it. These tools can absolutely help you with getting off the ground with your podcast and maybe even make it to where you don't even need to hire someone to help you do some of these things. So Buzzsprout is one of them. And if you're going to go with Buzzsprout as your podcast host, I recommend throwing in Magic Mastering. So if you've heard me talk about this, I actually have, do I have one or two? I know I have at least one video on YouTube about Magic Mastering and what it does, what it is. I created it right after they released it, but it's basically, in the way that Buzzsprout describes it, it's like an Instagram filter for your audio. It crisps everything up to where it's clean audio and it sounds fantastic. And to be honest, this is how I get away with very minimal editing of my audio. I will go in and I will clean up any mistakes, anything that I'm just like, oh my gosh, that sounded terrible. I need to redo that, or I just need to cut it out. I will do all of that in my software. But then whenever I upload it to Magic Mastering, that filter is what makes it sound so good. So like the file that you would listen to on my computer sounds very different than the one that you actually hear in Buzzsprout. So what you're listening to right now is a lot clearer and crisper than what I have on my computer. So if you are looking for something that will help you level and master your actual audio file, Magic Mastering. If I were starting today, I would opt in and add Magic Mastering to my Buzzsprout account. So I'm just saying, like it helps me every single month, every single week. Whenever I put out a brand new episode, Magic Mastering is on my side. It is my best friend. So, okay, next is software. Audio software. So I started with Audacity. I used Audacity for about 2 full years, and I had been using Hindenburg for the last year. Now, I know that you are probably on a budget, depending on where you are in your podcast journey. I know I would have been hesitant to invest a lot of money in software when I was just getting started and wasn't sure if I was going to like podcasting. Would podcasting actually be for me? Do I need to continue in this journey? So if I was starting today, I would probably still start with Audacity, but I would upgrade my software probably after the first 3 months. I really would. Like if you've been podcasting for a while and you're still using Audacity and you're getting frustrated, you're frustrated with the process. Maybe you don't like certain things about it, or you're using GarageBand or another free software that's kind of limited in what you can do. I would absolutely recommend upgrading. And my favorite software is Hindenburg. So if you've never heard of this before, this is the platform that I use now. And I wish I would have started using this years ago, because it actually helps you auto level any of your audio. So, you listened to probably last week's episode with Kate, and whenever I download her interview file, right? We have 2 audio files, mine and hers. Whenever I download those and I drop them into Hindenburg, what Hindenburg does is it automatically levels both of our volumes to where I'm not talking super, super high and then Kate's audio is really, really low, to where the audience would have to adjust their earbuds, right? Have you ever done this? Have you ever listened to a podcast where you're listening and you're like, oh my gosh, like someone's screaming in my ear. And then the next minute, the next person is like, they're kind of whispering and it sounds really low. And you're like, what's going on? I have to adjust the volume because I can't hear them really well. No, you don't want that to happen. So that is what Hindenburg does. It brings all of the audio levels up to one place to where it is a pleasant listening experience for everybody. And it definitely saves on me having to do a lot of leveling and mastering on my end. So between Hindenburg and Magic Mastering, y'all, I don't do a ton of editing behind the scenes. Okay, I'm just gonna tell you like it is, and tell it like it is. It just, I just don't do a lot. So I am pleasantly surprised, Krystal. I expected a typical company tutorial. I was so happy to see you doing a show and tell. Thank you. This is a testimony from Kathy, who is one of our Profit Podcasting students. She left this comment about one of our tech library tutorials. Yes, if you are part of Profit Podcasting, I do walkthroughs, step-by-steps of how I actually edit my podcast every single week. We have some fantastic tutorials. So if technology is the thing holding you back from starting your podcast, Profit Podcasting would be perfect for you. Go to krystalprofit.com/course to learn more. And we would love to welcome you into the program that has helped hundreds of podcasters get their show up and running in less than 30 days. So again, go to krystalprofit.com/course. Okay, let's get back to the episode.
Being a woman in business comes with its own unique set of challenges, but also so many opportunities. We get ahead by leaning in to what makes us different from business as usual. I'm Samantha Hartley, host of Profitable Joyful Consulting, inviting you to a special 6-episode series exploring the experience of being a woman in business. You want to hear from women consultants who've hit $1 million, who sell 6-figure engagements, or who've broken their own revenue ceilings? Yeah, those are my clients, and they'll be sharing too. Join me for 6 must-listen episodes that tackle key challenges for women consultants. Follow Profitable Joyful Consulting on your favorite podcast app.
All right, so next, we're going to move into a transcription software. Is this necessary at the beginning? No, but I would recommend it for the free versions that are out there. So I used otter.ai for a very long time on their free plan before I ever upgraded. And it wasn't actually until I started writing my book that I upgraded because I was using previous content for some of the chapters in the book. Like I would take audio and video files, put them in Otter, and then this was like the skeleton of, a certain chapter, and I would go in and format it. So I was using the free version of Otter forever. And then I finally upgraded. So you can absolutely get by with free versions of transcription tools, but I would try out Otter, and then Descript is another tool that I'm really excited to experiment with. And I'm going to show you, I have some YouTube videos coming out soon where I'm going to go through step by step how to use Descript as a podcaster. I'm actually a partner with them now, and I can't wait to show you because, oh my gosh, I've been playing around with the software and it's really, really cool. It's so cool how you can just go in, you can edit the text like a Google document, and it will actually edit your audio. Oh my gosh, like it's so awesome. I'm stumbling over my words because I'm really excited about it. So otter.ai, Descript. Another software tool that I would use is ConvertKit. I would 100% use ConvertKit. Now, if you did listen to my episode last week with Kate Doster, we talked about email marketing, and I asked her, I'm like, what are your favorite email service providers? And she talked about, she uses ActiveCampaign, and she talked about a few other ones. There was MailChimp, but we were both like, where was ConvertKit's free trial whenever we were getting started? Because you can use ConvertKit for your first 1,000 subscribers. Y'all, I got a 2-week trial, a 14-day trial in 2017, and I've been paying every single month since then. Okay, so trust me when I say ConvertKit's free trial is amazing. Yeah, it's probably still limited. You can't do everything that you could do on a paid version, but absolutely, ConvertKit to still send my emails every week to my list and to grow my email list because it is so phenomenal. I love ConvertKit. Love it, love, love it. I'm going to have links. I'm an affiliate for a lot of these programs and softwares. So I'm going to have links to these in the show notes. But everything I've mentioned here, there's a free trial that you can go and check it out. Even Hindenburg, if you are a Buzzsprout user already, they have a free trial. I can't remember if it's 60 days or 90 days, but you can absolutely go try out Hindenburg for free and decide if that's the software that you want to try out. Okay, moving on. Oh my gosh, we're 25 plus minutes in and I have so much to share. So Asana, this is another platform that I would recommend you using from day one. I wish I would have started using Asana a long time ago. I started using a Google Sheet, which is very humble and very fantastic. I still use a Google Sheet for planning my content, but I use Asana to help me stay more organized with when I'm supposed to publish content. And I love that I can check it off. It gives you that satisfaction of like, do you ever make your to-do list and you love to just like write it out and just scratch it off? That is what Asana is for me. It hits those like endorphins of just being able to like, I check that off my list. It feels so good. Maybe not other people feel that way, but it's how I feel about Asana. I love it so much. It helps me plan my podcast, plan my projects, do my promotions. I write emails in there. I do so many things in Asana. Okay, so let's move into programs. Okay, and this is just 100% some shameless plugging. Okay, because if I were starting in 2021, I would get into profit podcasting 100%. And the reason why I say that is not just because it's my program, it's because I know the ins and outs of this program answers so many questions that you don't know you have until you start podcasting. I can't even tell you how many times I've had someone say to me, like, how did you know? Like, you knew I was going to get stuck trying to figure out my audience, or you knew that planning the first 20 episodes of my content was really going to help me get over the hump of getting through the first month or so of my podcast. And I'm so proud of this program. And actually, if you are a profit podcasting student, I have some really cool news. We are working on getting a private audio experience for profit podcasting. So soon you're going to be able to listen to a podcast of all of the course modules. So if that's appealing to you, if you're like, oh man, I wish I could just put Krystal in my pocket and have her talk podcasting to me all day and teach me in her course, you will absolutely be able to do that soon. So I'm really excited about it. And we're going to have links to this in the show notes. So if you're interested in joining us in profit podcasting, we'd love to have you. Like I said, we teach you how to start, launch, and market your podcast. The other awesome program that we have is our Ultimate Podcast Launch Toolkit. Now, this is for someone, because I got this question the other day, like, well, what's the difference between your course and your toolkit? Now, the course is meant for someone that needs navigation through every piece of podcasting. Like, you're like, I don't know what my podcast topic is going to be. I don't know the name of my podcast. I need help developing my artwork. I need like just all the pieces, planning the launch, getting my marketing off the ground. If that is you, then profit podcasting is definitely the route I would recommend. But if you just need help launching the thing, right? If you're like, no, Krystal, I've recorded my stuff. I know how Audacity works. I've got my, podcast hosting set up. I got most of it down. I'm like 80% there. Then the Ultimate Podcast Launch Toolkit could be the thing that kind of pushes you over the edge, right? Like, think of someone kind of gently shoving you off the cliff in like a loving way, right? Because you got a parachute on, or you're just, you're going cliff jumping and you needed someone to push you off the edge. That's me. And that's the Ultimate Podcast Launch Toolkit. And this is one of those products that I'm so proud of because it helps get you and your podcast up and running in 30 days or less. And it's really cool. So I'm going to have a link to that in the show notes. And actually, another really cool product that's going to be available really soon is the BC Stack 2021. Now, this is only a product that comes around once a year. The promotional period this year is actually June 13th through June 18th. So if you're listening to this later on and you're like, well, Krystal, it's September. Like, what are you even talking about? Well, it only comes around once a year, but this year I'm actually creating a specific product about podcast websites. And this is the product that I wish I would have had whenever I first got started, because I do believe that your podcast website is very, very important. Now, a podcast website could vary, like there's a spectrum, right? There's a spectrum from not having a website to one that's like, you pay $10,000 to a developer to do all these fancy things. Like, no, we're not doing that. I've never done that. So let's talk about that for a second. I've never spent a ton of money on a podcast website, but I can tell you what has made my website successful, what pieces of it are most important, and where you should focus and concentrate. So if podcast websites are something that you're like, oh my gosh, like this is the training that I need, then be on the lookout, because we're going to be sending some emails and posting on social media soon to tell you all about BC Stack 2021. Okay, y'all, oh my gosh, I still have so much more to cover, but I want to tell you real fast, if you're listening and you want to go to any of the links, the show notes are going to be krystalprofit.com/episode 261. That's where you're going to find everything that we've talked about here today. But I want to try to wrap this up and get through these last few points. So my podcast format, if I were starting my podcast in 2021, what I have learned, this is for me personally, okay? So don't take this as like, this is the key to success in launching a podcast in 2021. But what I have learned is I really enjoy shorter episodes published more often. Now, I know you're listening to this and you're like, Krystal, this is going to be over a 30-minute episode. I don't see that as a short episode. Well, this is a little bit different. Like I said, we're 585 episodes into podcasting at this point. I'm 3 years in, okay? 30 minutes is a pretty like average episode for me. But if I were just getting started, I would probably do 15-minute episodes every week. So maybe an episode on Tuesday, an episode on Thursday, but just at 15 minutes just to get started and just to find my groove and just to feel confident behind the microphone. And that's really how I would get started. And I would probably do a mix between solo and interview style. And if you're like, yeah, 15 minutes doesn't sound very long for an interview, that's what I would do. I would do it. Maybe it would go up to 20 minutes, but I have listened to some incredible podcast interviews that are actually less than 30 minutes. So I know that it can be done. And that's probably what I would do if I were starting in 2021. I would have shorter episodes. I would post more often. And the reason why is because instead of one 30-minute episode, 1 hour-long episode, I could break it up into chunks and put it in front of my audience more so throughout the week, where I feel like I would stay more top of mind. So that's just my personal take on what I would do different if I were starting my podcast today. And then the top priorities and goals for my show really wouldn't change from what they are today. And I'm going to list these out. I just kind of did like a brain dump of like, well, if I were starting today, what would I want to make sure are some of my top goals? And the first one is be authentic. Like, be truly authentic, be totally you. Like, remember, I started at the beginning telling y'all how ridiculous I am about friends. Like, I just spouted off all of these different parts of the episode of the one that could have been. And that's just truly me, right? If I was trying to be like somebody else, I'd be like, oh no, they're too polished and reserved to share that side of themselves. No, I'm showing up 100% as myself. So I would encourage you to do the same. And that's the advice I would give to myself if I was starting today. And the next piece is kind of related, and it's to not try to sound so polished or like another podcaster. Now, I fell into this comparison trap of, maybe I should do mine like Amy Porterfield. Maybe I should do my podcast like Dave Ramsey or Christy Wright, because these were the people that I was listening to whenever I started my journey. And what happened was I started to listen to myself. I record my podcast and I go listen to it when I'm editing it. And I would think, that just doesn't sound like me. I would never say something that way. Like if we were sitting over a cup of coffee, just having a conversation, I would never say something the way that I said that sentence or the way that I said that phrase. That just sounded really weird to me. So I would recommend anybody getting started, like, don't try to sound so polished or try to emulate somebody else. Just be yourself, be authentic. And the other thing is I would try to figure out the promotional and marketing pieces of my content a lot faster. Now, today, oh my gosh, y'all, this is my superpower. It is my superpower to align what I'm actually doing in my business to what's happening on the podcast and on my YouTube channel, on my email, on my social. Like all of that fits together like a very well-crafted puzzle. But in the beginning, oh no, it was like a 1,000-piece puzzle scattered all over the floor, vacuumed, like stuck in the vacuum underneath the couch, like all over the place. It was a mess. So I would really make it a point to figure that out a lot faster than I originally did in my podcast journey. And then the other thing that I would do if I were starting today is to guest on more podcasts. I've actually been saying this, I feel like for the last year, that this has been my goal. I need to guest on more podcasts. I need to guest on more podcasts. Krystal, you need to get on more podcasts. I'm telling this to myself, and I need to make this a top priority. So you will be seeing me do this more in quarter 3, quarter 4 of 2021, because it's something that I am doing in real time and I need to just focus on it. I need to be more intentional about guesting on podcast, but it's something I would absolutely put as a priority for me if I was just getting started in 2021. Now I want to wrap up this episode with what I would not do, knowing all the things that I know now and the information that I've shared here with you today. If you are brand new, you're just getting started, here's my advice to you and to myself. Like if I was coaching myself, like, oh, you're starting a podcast in 2021, tell me what it's about. I would tell you to not do these 3 things. Okay. Are you ready? Are you ready? Okay. Write them down if you need to come back to them, or just come back and listen to this part of the episode, because I'm going to tell you these things because I really, 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 really think this is important. Number 1, I would not do a video podcast. Ooh, that hit a nerve, didn't it? Because I feel like everyone right now is saying, you got to do a video podcast. You got to do a video podcast. If you don't do a video podcast, you're terrible and you're going to fail and you're never going to be successful. I would not do a video podcast if I were just starting. Now, that does not mean I wouldn't transition into it after the first 3 months, after the first month. But whenever I was first launching my podcast, I would not do a video podcast, because I know, and having done more than 200 YouTube videos, I can't even tell you how many Facebook lives, how many YouTube lives, IG lives, like all the things, I still would not do a video podcast, because there's an added element of being live or being on a pre-recorded video that it throws you off. If you don't come from a journalistic background of being on camera, being behind the camera, and you're brand new to the online space, period, a video podcast will jack with your head. It will jack with your head. You're like, wait, are my wrinkles showing? Did I put on enough makeup? Is my hair crazy? Y'all, I can't even tell you. I'll watch a YouTube video and I'm like, why didn't anybody tell me I had some crazy flyaways? Like, I mean, just things that are so ridiculous that I notice because I've been doing this for a while. I'm like, oh my gosh, I should have looked in the mirror before I started recording. But there's just a lot of added pressure when you throw in a video podcast. So if I were starting today, I still wouldn't do a video podcast. The second thing is I would not try to batch a lot of content. I actually see this as a mistake as brand new podcasters get started. And the reason why is I don't think that you will have a really clear content strategy right when you launch your podcast, because you will see, you think a piece of content is going to perform really, really well for your audience. and you will be surprised at what they actually respond to. Maybe you will curate and craft this incredible episode, but your audience doesn't care about that topic. Or, you throw something together last minute and people will say, oh my gosh, we want more of this. And it'll totally surprise you. So I love the idea of planning ideas out, right? I have nothing against that. I love it. I know Brittany was on the podcast, Brittany Binion. She's actually a Profit Podcasting student. She came on the show and she said she planned out her first year of episodes. And I was like, this is incredible, like star student. It was so amazing whenever she talked about planning everything out, but she didn't record everything. She just wrote all of the ideas out. And this is what I recommend, but I don't recommend batching all of it because you never know. You could change everything about your show whenever you get started, right? We all have to start somewhere, but I don't want you to feel trapped in publishing content that you really don't feel good about once it's actually recorded. And maybe that's another topic we can go into another day, but I just wouldn't recommend batching a ton of content as soon as you get started. I think your first 10 episodes, awesome, but no more than that. No more than 10 episodes because you need at least 3 to 5 to launch and then a few after that to give you some cushion, but don't try to batch way too much right at the beginning. And then the third thing I would not do if I was starting today is record when I'm distracted. This is more of a personal thing for me and not so much advice for other people. It's just a simple fact that I've learned about myself is I have to have a solid hour buffer of time of when I'm going to record. And that means, if I sat down, I had every intention, y'all. I'm actually shocked right now. I had every intention of this episode today being on the shorter side, and we're 40 plus minutes in at this point. I was like, I'm going to sit down. This is going to be like a 20-minute episode. I'm just going to bang this out. Y'all, I'm already double the amount of time that I thought it was going to take. And I just want to tell you that I can do that because I'm not like, oh my God, I got to hurry up and finish because I got to run out the door. I got to go to an appointment. I got to do this, or the kids are going to be loud and they're going to be crazy. Like, don't record whenever you're distracted. This is me telling myself advice because I know this about myself. And I would just recommend finding that intentional time. Remember, we talked about planning and scheduling time earlier. Finding that intentional time where you can really get into that creative headspace of feeling comfortable behind the microphone, letting your ideas flow, letting your stories flow, and just really delivering a powerful message to your audience. Oh my gosh, this was so fun. And now I'm like just imagining I just went through like a coaching session with myself. Maybe this was like a therapy session for if I was starting in 2021. Like, seriously, this is the advice I would give to myself. And I feel like I could have went on about tools and software for 20 more minutes. So if you have any questions, if you are just getting started, please don't hesitate to reach out. Like, I love our Facebook community. If you're not a part of our community over there, there's going to be a link in the show notes. We would love to have you. There's always incredible conversations. There's great questions in there. And I just love that people feel really comfortable asking questions because I tell everybody all the time, I've already asked all the stupid questions. There's no more stupid questions left. I've already asked them all. So feel free to come over there, reach out in the community. If you're looking for a guest for your show, if you're looking to figure out a piece of your software or your equipment, don't hesitate to reach out. But the show notes for today's episode are krystalprofit.com/episode 261. And if you are brand new around here, make sure you hit that follow button, take a screenshot, and share this on social media. I would love for you to tag me and tell me what your number one takeaway is. And if you are starting your podcast in 2021, what would be your biggest goal? I would love to know. I would absolutely love to know. If you are starting your podcast this year, tell me, what is your biggest goal in starting your podcast? But as always, remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. Hey, Profit Podcast listeners. Thanks for sticking around to a little bit after the episode to hear this special message because I want to hear from you. We are starting a new segment called Fan Mail Shoutouts, and I want to hear from you and I want to hear your questions. What do you want to know? What questions have you been dying to ask me? So here's how to make this happen. Go to the app where you're listening to this podcast right now. Go there. I'll wait a second. Okay. Now, once you're there, you're going to see a hyperlink at the top of the episode description that says, send Krystal a text message. And that's all I want you to do. Send me a text. It could be casual, informal. It could be totally anonymous. Or if you want, you can include your name and the name of your podcast or content wherever you are creating, and I will give you a special shout out in an upcoming episode. So again, go to the show notes for where you're listening to this episode right now, and it will say, send Krystal a text message. And I cannot wait to hear from you and give you a shout out in an upcoming segment of Fan Mail Shoutouts.